The crystal throne room of Veltar Prime stretched for miles in every direction. Pillars of black stone rose into the darkness above, each one carved with the names of conquered worlds. The floor beneath was made of polished bone from 1,000 different species, all of them now extinct or enslaved. At the center of this massive hall sat King Zarok, ruler of the Hegemony and terror of the galaxy. Zarok was 12 feet tall, his body covered in thick armor that had never known defeat. His 4 arms rested on the armrests of his throne, each hand capable of crushing steel. His head bore the ceremonial war crown of his people, a twisted metal circlet embedded with the eyes of fallen enemies. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Bring me the reports," he commanded. A small figure scurried forward from the shadows. This was Velka, his chief intelligence officer. She was barely half his size, her thin frame bent with age and fear. In her trembling hands she carried a datapad that glowed with soft blue light. "My lord," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Outer Rim sectors report complete compliance. Sector 779 has surrendered without resistance. Their population has been processed for work assignments." Zarok nodded with satisfaction. For 3,000 years his royal armada had swept across the galaxy like a plague. Every world that saw his crimson banners knew their fate was sealed. His ships were the size of cities, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet in half. His soldiers were bred for war, genetically enhanced to feel no fear and show no mercy. "What of the border worlds?" he asked. "All conquered, my lord. The Kethler system fell last month. The Tridonian colonies have been absorbed into the workforce. Even the warrior clans of Morduk have bent the knee." The king's mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a different face. On his, it looked like a predator baring its teeth. 3,000 years of conquest, and still no one could stand against his might. The galaxy belonged to him, and every living thing in it existed only because he allowed it. "Is there nothing left to conquer?" he asked, almost disappointed. Velka hesitated for a moment, consulting her datapad. "Well, my lord, there are the outer spiral territories. Our scouts have been mapping them for years. Most are empty space, but there are a few systems with primitive life." "Primitive life?" Zarok leaned forward, his interest sparked. "Tell me, nothing worth your attention." "My lord. Gas giant miners, asteroid farmers, a few colony worlds barely capable of spaceflight. None pose any threat to the hegemony." The king was about to dismiss the report when another figure entered the throne room. This one was different from the cowering servants and terrified officials who usually approached his throne. Ambassador Kralena of the Galactic Council walked with purpose, her blue skin marking her as one of the few species still allowed to exist independently under hegemony. "Rule." "Your Majesty," she said, bowing low but not groveling like the others, "I bring urgent news from the Council." Zarthok's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council was a joke, a collection of weak species who pretended they still had power. He kept them around because it amused him to watch them scramble for his approval, but Kralena was different. She was smart and she was useful. "Speak," he commanded. Kralena stepped forward and activated a holographic projector. Above them, a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, rotating slowly in the air. She pointed to a section near the outer edge, far from the bright core. Worlds where the hegemony held power. "Our deep space scouts have discovered something interesting in this sector," she said. "A small solar system with several planets. One of them appears to be inhabited by a species that has just achieved faster-than-light travel." Zarok stared at the map. The system was tiny, insignificant. A single star with a handful of planets orbiting it. But something about it caught his attention. "What are they called?" he asked. "Humans, my lord. They live on the 3rd planet from their star, which they call Earth. Our scouts report that they have no unified government, no significant military, and their technology is centuries behind our own." The king stood from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the floor. This was interesting. A new species to conquer, a new world to add to his collection. and from the sound of it, they would provide little resistance. How many ships would it take? He asked. Velka consulted her datapad quickly. For a world of that size and level of development? Perhaps 50 ships, my lord. Maybe 100 if they prove stubborn. Zarthok laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 50 ships? For one primitive world? He turned to face his war council, who had gathered at the sound of his laughter. I think you underestimate the value of making an example. War Admiral Vexmal stepped forward from the group. He was the king's most decorated military commander, a veteran of 100 campaigns. His scarred face bore the marks of countless battles, and his uniform was heavy with medals torn from defeated enemies. My lord? He asked. Prepare the royal fleet, Zarthok commanded. All of it. A gasp went up from the assembled council. The royal fleet was the crown jewel of the Hegemony's military might. 2,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of destruction. The fleet had never been deployed in its entirety for a single target. Entire star systems had fallen to much smaller forces. My lord, Dixmal said carefully, surely such overwhelming force is unnecessary for a single primitive world. Zarthok's eyes flashed with anger. Are you questioning my judgment, Admiral? Never, my lord. The royal fleet will serve as a message, the king interrupted. Not just to these humans, but to the entire galaxy. Let every world see what happens when they even think about resisting the hegemony. Let them witness the full might of my power. Dexmal bowed deeply. As you command, my lord. How long do I have to prepare? You will depart within the week. I want this done quickly and completely. No survivors, no mercy. Turn their world into an example that will echo across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. Ambassador Kralena watched the exchange with growing unease. She had seen the hegemony crush worlds before, but always with calculated force. This felt different, wasteful. 2,000 ships against a single primitive world seemed like using a plasma cannon to kill an insect. My lord, she said carefully, if I may suggest, you may not. Zarthok cut her off. The decision is made. These humans will learn what it means to exist in my galaxy. Over the next several days, the royal fleet began to assemble. Ships poured in from across the hegemony, each one a floating fortress bristling with weapons. The smallest vessels were half a mile long. The largest, including Vexmal's flagship, the Crimson Death, stretched for nearly 10 miles from bow to stern. The sight of the fleet gathering sent ripples of fear across the galaxy. News traveled fast in civilized space, and soon every world knew that the king's full might was being unleashed against some unknown target. Old enemies of the hegemony trembled, wondering if they had somehow offended the king. Allied worlds sent tribute. Hoping to avoid whatever fate awaited the fleet's target, War Admiral Vexmal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final preparations. Around him, his officers worked with efficient precision. They had done this dance 1,000 times before, but never on this scale. The admiral himself felt a strange mixture of excitement and concern. The excitement came from commanding such overwhelming force. The royal fleet was a weapon that could crack planets and boil oceans. Under his command, it would sweep away any resistance like a tidal wave. The humans would never know what hit them. The concern came from the waste of it all. Intelligence. Reports suggested that Earth was barely worth conquering. A single inhabited world with primitive technology and no unified defense. His smallest battle group could have handled the conquest easily. Bringing the entire royal fleet seemed excessive, even cruel, but King Zarthok's orders were absolute. The admiral had not survived this long by questioning his ruler's commands. If the king wanted to make an example of these humans, then an example they would become. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the final squadron has arrived. All ships report ready for hyperspace. Vexmal nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice echoed across 2,000 ships, reaching nearly 1 million soldiers and crew members. Warriors of the hegemony, he began. Today we embark on a glorious mission. We carry the king's wrath to a distant world that dares to exist without his permission. We go to show the galaxy that no corner of space is beyond our reach. Victory will be swift, and our enemies will be crushed beneath the weight of our might." A cheer went up across the fleet, transmitted through the communication channels. It was the sound of 1,000,000 voices raised in bloodthirsty anticipation. The crews had been chosen from the most aggressive species in the Hegemony. They lived for conquest and fed on the fear of their enemies. "Prepare for hyperspace," Vexmo commanded. The massive fleet began to move as one. Space around Veltar Prime twisted and warped as 2,000 hyperspace drives activated simultaneously. One by one, the great ships vanished into the swirling vortex of faster-than-light travel, heading toward a small blue world that had no idea what was coming. King Zarok watched from his palace as the last ship disappeared. Soon the humans would learn what it meant to draw his attention. Soon the galaxy would have a new example of his power. And soon another species would join the long list of those who had dared to exist in his domain. The die was cast. The royal fleet was on its way to Earth. In the depths of space, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen raced toward what should have been the easiest conquest in history. Behind them, they left a galaxy holding its breath. Ahead of them waited a species that would change everything they thought they knew about war. The bridge of the United Earth Defense Command Station hummed with quiet activity. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the main display screen, watching the routine patrol reports from the outer system. At 52 years old, she had dedicated her entire life to Earth's defense, working her way up from a shuttle pilot to the commander of humanity's space forces. The morning had started like any other. Supply convoys moved between the asteroid mining stations. Research vessels collected data from the gas giants. The Mars colonies reported normal operations. Everything was peaceful in the Sol system, just as it had been for the past 20 years. Since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, then Lieutenant Commander Park at the sensor station called out, "Admiral, I'm getting something strange on the deep space array." Chun turned toward him. Park was one of her best officers, calm and reliable. If he sounded concerned, there was a good reason. "What do you have, Commander?" Park's fingers moved across his console, bringing up a three-dimensional display of the outer system. At the very edge of the screen, small red dots appeared, dozens of them. "Hyperspace signatures, Admiral." "Big ones, multiple contacts emerging at the edge of the system." Chun felt her heart rate increase. In the 20 years since humanity had joined the galactic community, they had always been the ones arriving unannounced at other systems. No one had ever come to Earth uninvited. "How many contacts?" she asked. Park's face went pale as more dots appeared on the screen. 50 ... 100. "Admiral, I'm reading over 500 contacts now, and more are still arriving." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of computers and the sound of breathing. Chun stared at the display as the number of contacts continued to climb. 600, 800, 1,000. "Commander, are you certain these readings are accurate?" "Yes, Admiral. The deep space array is functioning perfectly." "These are definitely ships, and they're massive?" "The smallest ones are reading as half a mile long. The largest ... double quotes." Park paused, double-checking his instruments. "Admiral, some of these ships are nearly 10 miles long." Chun's mind raced. She had studied every known species in the galaxy. The largest ships she knew about belonged to the Hegemony, and even their biggest vessels were only a few miles long. What kind of fleet was this? "Put me through to Defense Council Priority Channel," she ordered. Within minutes, Chun was connected to the highest levels of Earth's government. President Martinez appeared on her screen from his office in Geneva, along with Defense Secretary Williams and several other officials. "Admiral, what's the situation?" Martinez asked. "Mr. President, we have a massive alien fleet at the edge of our system. At least 1,000 ships, possibly more. They appeared without warning and without any attempt at communication." The president's face grew serious. "Any idea who they are or what they want?" "Not yet, sir. But based on the size and composition of this fleet, I don't think they're here for a friendly visit. Defense Secretary Williams leaned forward. Admiral, what are our options? Chun had been asking herself the same question. Earth Space Force consisted of 200 ships, most of them built for patrol and exploration rather than combat. Against 1,000 enemy vessels, the odds were impossible. Sir, we need to activate the Omega protocols immediately. President Martinez nodded grimly. The Omega protocols were Earth's deepest secret, a defense plan that had been in development for decades. Most people didn't even know it existed. Do it, he said. Chun turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Torres, send out Omega code. 1 to all stations. Authentication, Sarah 77 Alpha. Torres' hands flew over his keyboard. Within seconds, signals raced out across the solar system at the speed of light. To anyone monitoring Earth's communications, it would look like routine maintenance messages to mining stations and research outposts, but they were much more than that. On Ceres, the largest asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter, Administrator Jackson received the message in his private office. He had been waiting for this day for 15 years, hoping it would never come. He walked to a wall panel and placed his hand on a scanner. A hidden door slid open, revealing a room full of military equipment. This is Ceres control to all stations, he broadcast on a secure channel. Omega protocol is now active. All units, proceed to assigned positions. Across the asteroid belt, similar scenes played out. Mining platforms that had operated peacefully for years suddenly came alive with new purpose. Massive cargo containers split open to reveal weapons that had been hidden inside. Robot miners stopped their work and began assembling into formations. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. Kim was studying ice samples when her computer chimed with an incoming message. She read the Omega code and immediately sealed her laboratory. Moving to a hidden elevator, she descended deep beneath the moon's surface to a vast underground facility that officially didn't exist. The facility contained some of humanity's most advanced technology, including experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics. Dr. Kim had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, and now it had finally arrived. Jupiter Defense Station coming online, she reported. All systems green. Back on the UEDC station, Admiral Chun watched as status reports flooded in from across the system. The Omega protocols were humanity's insurance policy, built in secret over decades. While the galaxy saw Earth as a peaceful, barely civilized world, the truth was very different. Humanity had been listening to galactic communications since they first achieved spaceflight. They had learned about the Hegemony's expansion and studied their tactics. They knew that eventually someone would come to conquer Earth, and they had prepared. Admiral, Park called out, the alien fleet is moving into the system. They're heading directly for Earth, Chun nodded. What's their estimated time of arrival? At current speed, approximately 18 hours, more than enough time, Chun said quietly. As the alien fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, War Admiral Vexmol stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Death. The journey from Veltar Prime had taken 3 weeks, and his crews were eager for action. Report, he commanded. His sensor officer, a reptilian creature named Stack, hissed as he read his instruments. Admiral, we have entered the target system. Scans show 1 inhabited world, approximately 7 billion life forms. Resistance? Minimal, Admiral. I detect perhaps 200 small vessels, most of them civilian in nature. No significant military presence. Vexmol smiled with satisfaction. The intelligence reports had been accurate. This would be even easier than expected. Open a communication channel to the inhabited world, he ordered. The communication officer worked for a moment, then nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Vexmol straightened his uniform and activated the transmission. This was always his favorite. Part of a conquest. The moment when the enemy realized how hopeless their situation was. Primitive inhabitants of the Third World, he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am War Admiral Vexmol of the Royal Hegemony Fleet. Your world has been selected for incorporation into the Hegemony. You will surrender immediately and prepare for processing. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your planet and all life upon it. He waited for the usual response. Sometimes the inhabitants tried to negotiate. Sometimes they begged for mercy. Often they simply went silent in terror. But the response that came from Earth was unlike anything he had ever heard. A human female appeared on his screen. She wore a military uniform that Dexmal didn't recognize, and her expression was calm and determined rather than fearful. "Unknown vessels," she said. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Command. You have entered sovereign human space without permission and issued threats against our world. I order you to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The bridge of the Crimson Death erupted in laughter. The XMOS officers had never heard anything so ridiculous. A primitive species threatening the royal fleet? It was beyond absurd. "Did she just threaten us?" asked Commander Vex, Dexmal's second-in-command. "I believe she did," Dexmal replied, wiping tears from his eyes. "How refreshing. It's been years since anyone was brave enough to be stupid." He activated the communication channel again. "Human Admiral, you clearly don't understand your situation. I command 2,000 warships, each one capable of destroying your entire world. You have perhaps 200 tiny vessels. Surrender now, and some of your species may be allowed to live as slaves." Chun's expression didn't change. "Admiral Dexmal, you have exactly 1 hour to begin your withdrawal from this system. If you do not comply, we will consider your presence an act of war." This time the laughter from the alien bridge was even louder. Dexmal had to hold up a hand to restore order. 1 hour, he said. "Very well, human. I'll give you 1 hour to watch my fleet approach your world. Then you can see what happens to species that threaten the hegemony." The communication ended, and Dexmal turned to his tactical officer. "Begin the approach. Battle formation. Let these humans see what real power looks like." The royal fleet moved forward in perfect formation. 2,000 ships arranged in a pattern that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. At the center, the largest dreadnoughts bristled with weapons capable of cracking planets. Around them, cruisers and destroyers formed protective screens. Fighter squadrons swarmed between the larger ships like angry insects. It was a sight that had made entire star systems surrender without firing a shot. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming, a demonstration of power that no sane species would challenge. But as the fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, something strange began to happen. The asteroids were moving. "Admiral," Stack reported, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting unusual activity in the asteroid field." "What kind of activity?" "The asteroids appear to be repositioning themselves, and I'm reading massive energy signatures from several of them." Dexmal frowned. "Asteroids don't reposition themselves. Check your instruments." "Instruments are functioning normally, Admiral. I'm also detecting movement from the outer planets. Large objects are emerging from the gas giant atmospheres." On his tactical display, Dexmal watched as objects that had been mistaken for asteroids and space debris began to reveal their true nature. What had appeared to be a peaceful solar system was transforming before his eyes. "Sir," his communication officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral." Chun appeared on the screen again, and this time Dexmal noticed something different about her expression. She looked almost excited. "Admiral Dexmal," she said, "your hour is up. Since you have chosen to ignore our warning, Earth's defense systems are now active. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position." Dexmal was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout his ship. His tactical display lit up with thousands of new contacts. The empty space around his fleet was suddenly filled with human vessels, weapons platforms, and structures that had been hidden or disguised. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded. Stack's voice was shaking. "Admiral, I'm reading over 10,000 contacts. And they're all armed." Dexmal stared at the display in disbelief. The intelligence reports had been wrong? Completely. Catastrophically wrong. This wasn't a primitive world with minimal defenses. This was a fortress system that had been disguised to look helpless. Admiral Chun, he said into the communication channel, his voice no longer confident. Perhaps we can discuss this situation. Chun's smile was cold as winter. The time for discussion is over, Admiral. You came here to conquer Earth. Let's see how that works out for you. The trap was set, and the royal fleet was caught in the middle of it. The greatest military force in the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened humanity's home. War Admiral Vexmal stared at his tactical display in growing confusion. What had been an empty solar system minutes ago was now crawling with human ships and weapons platforms. His sensors showed over 10,000 contacts and more were appearing. Every second, this is impossible, he muttered to himself. The intelligence report said they were primitive. Commander Vex approached his position holding a datapad. Admiral, our deep scans are revealing something disturbing. Those asteroids aren't asteroids. They're weapons platforms disguised to look like space rocks. Vexmo grabbed the datapad and studied the readings. What his sensors had initially identified as mining equipment was actually massive railgun installations. The cargo containers floating throughout the system contained hidden missile batteries. Even the space stations orbiting the outer planets were bristling with weapons that had been concealed until now. How long have they been preparing for this? He asked. Unknown, Admiral. But based on the scope of these installations, it must have been decades, maybe longer. The War Admiral felt something he hadn't experienced in years, uncertainty. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had conquered hundreds of worlds. Every enemy had followed the same pattern. They saw his fleet, realized they were outmatched, and either surrendered or put up a brief, hopeless fight before being crushed. This was different. The humans had laid a trap, and his entire fleet was sitting in the middle of it. Sir, his communication officer called out, the humans are transmitting on multiple frequencies. It appears to be some kind of countdown. Countdown to what? Unknown, Admiral. But they're broadcasting it throughout the system. On Earth, Admiral Chun stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been built in secret 50 years ago, designed to coordinate Earth's defense against exactly this kind of threat. Around her, dozens of officers worked at their stations, managing the most complex military operation in human history. All stations report. Ready, announced Commander Rodriguez, her chief of staff. Outer system defenses are in position. Jupiter platforms are armed and targeting. Asteroid defense grid is online. Chun nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Her voice would reach every human ship and station throughout the Sol system. All units, this is Admiral Chun. Today we face the greatest threat humanity has ever known. These aliens came here expecting an easy conquest. They thought we were weak, primitive, helpless. They were wrong. She paused, looking around at the faces of her officers. These men and women had trained their entire lives for this moment. For 50 years, our predecessors prepared for this day. They studied our enemies, learned their tactics, and built defenses they never dreamed we possessed. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth. Today we show them that humanity will never bow to anyone. On the bridge of the Crimson Death, Vexmal listened to the human admiral's speech with growing anger. How dare these primitives speak to him with such defiance? He had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than theirs. Enough of this, he snarled. Prepare the planet killer. We'll show these humans what real power looks like. His weapons officer, a hulking creature with 4 arms, began working at his console. Planet killer charging, Admiral. Target locked on their moon. Vexmal smiled coldly. The planet killer was the royal fleet's most feared weapon. It could punch through any shield, destroy any target. He would start by obliterating Earth's moon, showing the humans that their defiance was pointless. Fire when ready, he commanded. The massive cannon on the front of the Crimson Death began to glow with deadly energy. Throughout the ship, power systems routed maximum energy to the weapon. In space, other ships in the fleet moved aside to give. The flagship a clear shot, but as the planet killer reached full charge, something unexpected happened. The humans struck first. Commander Sarah Kim watched from her control room deep beneath Europa's ice. Her facility, officially listed as a research station, was actually one of humanity's most advanced weapons laboratories. For 20 years, she had been developing technology that pushed the boundaries of physics. "Target the flagship," she ordered her weapons team. "Full power to the kinetic accelerator." Her chief engineer nodded and began the firing sequence. Accelerator. Charging. Projectile loaded. Mass. 10,000 kilograms. Velocity at launch. 15% light speed. The weapon that fired from Europa looked simple enough. It was just a piece of metal, shaped like a long rod, accelerated to incredible speed by magnetic fields. But when something that heavy moves that fast, it becomes one of the most destructive forces in the universe. The projectile crossed the distance between Europa and the alien flagship in seconds. To the aliens, it appeared on their sensors as a tiny blip, too small to be a threat. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. Not solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. The kinetic round hit the crimson. Death like the fist of an angry god. The alien flagship was 10 miles long and built to withstand the firepower of entire fleets. Its shields could absorb planet-killing energy blasts. Its armor was made from the strongest materials in the galaxy. None of it mattered. The kinetic projectile punched through the ship's shields as if they weren't there. It tore through the hull like paper, vaporizing everything in its path. The impact released more energy than a nuclear bomb, turning the front third of the ship into superheated plasma. On the bridge, Vexmol was thrown from his feet as his flagship shuddered and began to break apart. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship. The lights flickered and went out, leaving only the red glow of emergency power. "Report!" he shouted over the noise. "Hull breach on decks 1 through 50. His damage control officer called out. "We've lost primary weapons, navigation, and life support in the forward sections. Casualty reports are coming in from all departments." Vexmol couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans had just crippled his flagship with a single shot. How was that possible? But the attack on the Crimson Death was only the beginning. Throughout the asteroid belt, hundreds of weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment suddenly came alive. Each one was built around a massive railgun similar to the weapon that had struck the flagship, but smaller and faster firing. The platforms had been positioned carefully over the years, placed to provide overlapping fields of fire throughout the inner system. As the alien fleet tried to regroup after the attack on their flagship, they found themselves under assault from every direction. Captain Vorth commanded one of the alien cruisers in the fleet's outer ring. His ship, the Iron Fang, was 2 miles long and armed with enough firepower to level a city. When the first kinetic rounds began flying, he wasn't worried. His shields could handle anything these primitives could throw at him. The first projectile that hit his ship proved him wrong. The round, weighing only a few hundred kilograms but moving at 10% of light speed, punched through his shields and tore a hole in his hull. The impact vaporized his weapon systems and killed half his crew in an instant. "Return fire," he ordered, but his weapons officer shook his head. "Weapons are offline, Captain. We're venting atmosphere from 12 hull breaches." Throughout the alien fleet, similar scenes played out. The humans' kinetic weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Most space combat involved energy weapons that could be blocked by shields. These solid projectiles hit with the force of meteors, and no shield technology could stop them. War Admiral Vexmol tried to coordinate his fleet's response from his damaged flagship, but the situation was spiraling out of control. His ships were designed to fight enemies who used conventional weapons and tactics. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Get us out of range of their weapons." But there was nowhere to run. The human weapons platforms surrounded his fleet on all sides. Every time one of his ships tried to move, it came under fire from multiple directions. Commander Jackson directing. The battle from his control center on Ceres watched the alien fleet's movements on his tactical display. The enemy was trying to break out of the trap, but they didn't understand how thoroughly they had been caught. "Target the large cruisers," he ordered his weapons teams. "Focus fire on their engines. Don't let them escape." The asteroid belt. Platforms opened fire in coordinated volleys. Hundreds of kinetic projectiles streaked through space, each one aimed at a specific target. The aliens' formation began to break apart as ship after ship was hit. But the humans weren't done yet. From the outer planets came another surprise. What the aliens had mistaken for research stations and gas mining platforms suddenly revealed their true purpose. Jupiter's massive storms had hidden an entire fleet of human warships built in secret over decades. Admiral Chen had saved the best surprise for last. While the aliens focused on the kinetic weapons platforms, her hidden fleet emerged from their concealment. These ships were different from anything else in the system. They were built specifically for this battle, designed to fight the Hegemony's tactics. The lead ship was the UES Defiance, commanded by Captain Maria Santos. Her vessel was only half a mile long, tiny compared to the alien dreadnoughts, but it carried weapons that would have seemed impossible to most galactic civilizations. "All ships, engage at will," Santos ordered her fleet. "Remember your training. Hit hard, move fast, and show these invaders what happens when they threaten Earth." The human fleet struck the aliens from behind, catching them between the asteroid platforms and the new arrivals. But these ships didn't use kinetic weapons. Instead, they carried something even more devastating. Captain Santos targeted one of the alien dreadnoughts and fired her main weapon. To outside observers, nothing seemed to happen. There was no visible beam, no missile trail, no explosion. But inside the alien ship, something terrible occurred. The weapon was a gravity manipulator developed in the secret laboratories beneath Europa. It created localized distortions in space-time, turning the alien ship's own mass against it. The 2-mile-long dreadnought began to compress under forces that shouldn't exist, its hull buckling and twisting as gravity went wild inside the vessel. The alien crew felt themselves being pulled in different directions at once. Some were crushed against bulkheads. Others found themselves floating as gravity reversed. The ship's structure couldn't handle the stress and began to tear itself apart. Similar attacks throughout the alien fleet created chaos beyond anything Nexmol had ever witnessed. His ships were being destroyed by weapons that defied understanding. The humans weren't just fighting his fleet, they were rewriting the rules of warfare. "Admiral," his communication officer called out, panic clear in his voice. "We're receiving surrender requests from 30 ships. Captain Zor's cruiser just broke formation and is trying to flee the system." Vexmol watched his tactical display. As his proud fleet crumbled, ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were being torn apart by primitives who shouldn't even understand basic physics. The Royal Fleet, terror of the galaxy, was being destroyed by a species they had thought to crush in a single day. "All ships, retreat to hyperspace range," he ordered. "Emergency jump authorization Crimson 7. But even retreat would prove harder than expected. The humans had thought of everything, and they weren't about to let their enemies escape to threaten Earth again. The real battle was just beginning. War Admiral Vexmol gripped the railing of his damaged bridge as another explosion rocked the Crimson Death. Half his fleet was already destroyed or crippled, and the humans showed no signs of slowing their attack. He had ordered a retreat, but the enemy seemed to have prepared for that too. "Hyperspace drives are not responding, Admiral," his navigation officer reported, terror clear in his voice. "Something is interfering with our jump calculations." "What do you mean, interfering?" "The humans appear to have devices that are disrupting local space-time. Our ships can't form stable hyperspace corridors." Vexmol felt cold dread spreading through his body. The humans weren't just attacking his fleet, they were trapping it. No enemy had ever managed to prevent the Royal Fleet from retreating. The Hegemony's hyperspace technology was the most advanced in the galaxy, or so he had thought. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the hyperspace disruption field from her secret laboratory. For 15 years, she had studied captured hegemony technology, learning how their faster-than-light drives worked. Then she had built something better. Field generators operating at 98% efficiency, she reported to Admiral Chun. The alien fleet is completely cut off from hyperspace. Nothing larger than a shuttle can jump out of the system. Chun's voice came back over the secure channel. Excellent work, Doctor. How long can you maintain the field? Indefinitely, Admiral. We have enough power to keep this running for weeks if necessary. The hyperspace trap was one of humanity's greatest secrets. By studying alien technology and combining it with human innovation, Earth scientists had created something the galaxy had never seen before. They could turn an entire star system into a prison, trapping enemy fleets with no possibility of escape. But the humans had even more surprises waiting. Commander Yuki Tanaka sat in the cockpit of her fighter, hidden inside what appeared to be a dead asteroid. Around her, 1,000 other pilots waited for their moment to strike. They called themselves the Swarm, and they were about to show the aliens something truly terrifying. Swarm leader to all units, she broadcast on a secure channel. Target the enemy fighters. Remember, they're faster than us, but we're smarter. Use the pack tactics we practiced. No heroics, no individual glory, we fight as one mind. The human fighters emerged from their hiding places throughout the asteroid belt. Each one was controlled by an advanced artificial intelligence that could think and react faster than any biological brain. But these AIs were different from the cold. Logical computers most species use. Human AIs had been taught to be creative, unpredictable, and aggressive. They could adapt to new situations in microseconds and coordinate with each other in ways that seemed almost telepathic. When 1,000 of them worked together, they became something unprecedented in galactic warfare, the alien fighter squadrons. That had been protecting the larger ships suddenly found themselves under attack from every direction. The human fighters moved in patterns that defied understanding, striking and vanishing like ghosts. They seemed to know where the aliens would be before the aliens knew it themselves. Squadron leader Krex had been flying combat missions for 50 years. His fighter was faster and more heavily armed than the primitive human craft attacking him. But somehow, every time he tried to target one of them, it wasn't where his sensors said it should be. They're predicting our movements. He called out to his wingmen. How is that possible? The answer came from the human fighter that appeared behind him without warning. Its weapons weren't the energy blasters he expected. Instead, it fired a cloud of tiny metal pellets that expanded like a net. His shields, designed to stop energy beams, were useless against solid projectiles. The pellets tore through his fighter's hull like bullets through paper. As Krex's ship exploded around him. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. The human fighters didn't just outnumber the aliens, they out-hot them. Every attack was perfectly coordinated, every movement precisely calculated. The alien squadrons that had terrorized countless worlds were being systematically destroyed by enemies they couldn't even predict. Back on his flagship, Lexmo watched his fighter cover disappear from his tactical display. Without fighters to protect them, his larger ships were sitting targets for the human weapons platforms. But the worst was yet to come. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the human homeworld. They appear to be charging some kind of planetary weapon. Lexmo felt his heart skip a beat. Planetary weapons were the stuff of legend. Theoretical devices that could destroy entire fleets from across a star system. No one had ever actually built one. The power requirements alone were thought to be impossible, but as he watched his sensors, energy readings from Earth climbed to levels that shouldn't exist. The entire planet seemed to be glowing with barely contained power. On Earth, Dr. Michael Chang stood in the control room of humanity's most secret project. Built deep beneath the North Pole, the Excalibur Array was the culmination of 50 years of weapons research. It was a weapon that used the planet itself as a focusing lens, channeling energy from Earth's core and magnetic field into a beam that could reach across the solar system. Power at maximum, he reported to Admiral Chun. Target locked on the alien command ship. Ready to fire on your order. Chun looked at the tactical display one more time. The alien fleet was trapped, surrounded, and being systematically destroyed. But she wanted to send a message that would echo across the galaxy for centuries. Fire, she ordered. The beam that erupted from Earth's North Pole was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were unmistakable. It crossed the distance to the alien flagship in seconds, carrying more energy than a star. When it struck the Crimson Death's shields, they didn't just fail, they vaporized. The beam punched through the massive ship like it was made of tissue paper. Metal that could withstand the heat of a sun melted instantly. The ship's reactor, designed to power weapons capable of destroying planets, overloaded and exploded. The Crimson Death, flagship of the Royal Fleet and terror of the galaxy, simply ceased to exist. Where a 10-mile-long warship had been moments before, there was now only expanding cloud of superheated gas, but Dexmal wasn't aboard the ship when it died. In the final seconds before the beam struck, his survival instincts had kicked in. He had abandoned his flagship in an escape pod, leaving his crew to die while he fled for his life. As his pod tumbled through space, the War Admiral watched the destruction of his fleet in horror and disbelief. Ship after ship was being torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. The Royal Fleet, which had conquered 1,000 worlds, was being obliterated by a species that was supposed to be primitive. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "We studied them. They were nothing, less than nothing." But even as he spoke, the truth was becoming clear. The humans had never been primitive. They had been hiding, preparing, waiting for this exact moment. Every piece of intelligence the Hegemony had gathered about Earth had been carefully crafted disinformation. Captain Santos of the UES Defiance was pursuing a group of alien cruisers that were trying to break out of the trap. Her ship's gravity weapons had already crippled 2 of them, but the third was proving stubborn. "Target their engines," she ordered her weapons officer. "I want them alive if possible. Someone needs to carry word back to their king about what happened here." The gravity beam struck the alien cruiser's rear section, crushing the engine compartments like an invisible fist. The ship went dead in space, its crew trapped but alive. Santos opened a communication channel to the crippled vessel. "Alien ship, this is Captain Santos of the United Earth Defense Force. Your engines are destroyed, but your life support is intact. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." The response came from a young alien officer whose captain had apparently been killed in the attack. "We surrender," he said, his voice filled with defeat. "Please, no more killing." Throughout the battlefield, similar surrenders were taking place. The aliens who had come to conquer Earth were now begging for mercy from the species they had planned to enslave. Admiral Chun watched the surrender reports come in from her command center. In less than 6 hours, the Royal Fleet had been reduced from 2,000 ships to fewer than 50 operational vessels. The rest were either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. "Admiral," Commander Rodriguez reported, "we're receiving a transmission from one of the alien escape pods. The sender claims to be their commanding officer." "Put him through," Chun ordered. Vexmo's battered face appeared on the main screen. His uniform was torn, his proud bearing replaced by obvious fear. "Human Admiral," he said, "I request safe passage for the survivors of my fleet. We will withdraw from your system and never return." Chun studied the alien who had come to destroy her world. "War Admiral Vexmo, I assume? The one who threatened to turn Earth into an example?" Yes, but surely you understand that I was only following orders. King Zarok commanded this attack. I bear you no personal ill will." "Orders," Chun repeated flatly. "How many worlds have you destroyed following orders, Admiral? How many species have you enslaved or killed?" That small silence was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," Chun continued. "You're going to take your surviving ships and return to your king. You're going to tell him exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that Earth is under human protection, and anyone who threatens us will face the same fate as your fleet." The alien admiral nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. We will never trouble you again." "Oh, Admiral, I think you misunderstood me," Chun said, her voice turning cold. You're not just going to leave us alone. You're going to spread the word throughout your empire that the age of conquest is over. Any world that asks for our protection will receive it. Any species that wants to be free from the hegemony need? Only call our name. Dexmol's face went pale. You can't be serious. King Zarok will never accept such terms. Then King Zarok will learn what happened to the last group that threatened humanity. We've been listening to your communications for decades, Admiral. We know about every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved. We know where your king lives, and we know how to reach him. Jun leaned forward, her eyes burning with determination. Tell your king that Earth remembers every crime the hegemony has committed. Tell him that humanity is coming and we're bringing justice with us. As the surviving alien ships limped away from Earth, carrying news of their defeat, to the galaxy, the humans began the next phase of their plan. For 50 years, they had prepared to defend their world. Now they were ready to free every other world that suffered under alien oppression. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's mercy was as dangerous as their wrath. And King Zarok was about to discover that threatening Earth had been the greatest mistake in the history of his empire. The crystal throne room of Veltar Prime had never been so quiet. King Zarok sat motionless on his throne, staring at the holographic display that showed the empty docking bays where his royal fleet should have been. 3 weeks had passed. Since the fleet's departure for Earth, 3 weeks since he had expected to add another conquered world to his empire. Instead, he was looking at the greatest military disaster in the history of the hegemony. War Admiral Vexmol knelt before the throne, his once proud uniform now torn and stained. His face bore the marks of his defeat, both physical and emotional. Behind him stood the surviving officers of the royal fleet, barely 300 souls out of the million who had left Veltar Prime with such confidence. Speak, Zarok commanded. His voice echoing through the vast chamber, Vexmol raised his head slowly. My lord, the royal fleet has been destroyed. Of the 2,000 ships that entered the human system, only 47 survived to make the return journey. The rest were either destroyed or captured by the enemy. The king's 4 hands gripped the armrests of his throne until the metal began to crack. Destroyed? By primitives? You expect me to believe that 200 human ships defeated the royal fleet? My lord, the intelligence reports were wrong. Completely wrong. The humans are not primitive. They possess technology that we cannot understand. They had been preparing for our arrival for decades, perhaps centuries. Zarok stood from his throne, his massive form towering over the kneeling admiral. You are telling me that you were outfought by a species that achieved faster-than-light travel only 20 years ago? My lord, they have weapons that bypass our shields entirely. Their ships can predict our movements before we make them. They can trap entire fleets in normal space, making hyperspace jumps impossible. They turned our own tactics against us and destroyed us with weapons we had never seen before. The king's rage was building like a storm. For 3,000 years, his empire had expanded without significant resistance. The royal fleet had been his instrument of conquest, the symbol of his absolute power. Now this broken admiral was telling him it had been obliterated by beings he had barely considered worthy of notice. Where are the human ships now? Zarok demanded. Unknown, my lord. They allowed the survivors to leave their system with a message. What message? Vexmol swallowed hard before answering. They said to tell you that Earth is under human protection, that any world requesting their aid will receive it. They said the age of conquest is over. The throne room erupted in nervous murmurs from the assembled court officials. No one had ever spoken to King Zarok with such defiance and lived to see another day. They dare to threaten me? The king roared. They dare to dictate terms to the ruler of the galaxy? My lord, Vexmol said quietly, I saw what they could do. Their smallest weapons could destroy our largest ships. They fought with a coordination and brutality that our forces could not match. If they decide to come here, then we will be ready for them, Zarok interrupted. Assemble every ship in the Empire. Call in forces from every sector. We will crush these humans once and for all. But even as the king spoke, reports were coming in from across the hegemony that would make such a response impossible. On the distant world of Kepler-7, Governor Thane received a transmission that changed everything. The message came on a frequency that the hegemony had been monitoring for years, but had dismissed as primitive chatter. Now he realized it was something far more significant. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Command," the human female said from his communication screen. "We understand that your world has been under hegemony occupation for 200 years. We are offering you the chance to be free." Governor Thane stared at the screen in shock. His species, the Keplerians, had been one of the first conquered by the hegemony. Their resistance had been crushed centuries ago, their culture nearly destroyed. He had spent his entire life believing that freedom was impossible. "You destroyed the royal fleet?" he asked, hardly daring to believe it. "We did. And we're prepared to help any world that wants to throw off hegemony rule. You don't have to live in fear anymore." Within hours of the transmission, rebellions broke out across Kepler-7, the hegemony garrison, already demoralized by news of the royal fleet's destruction, found itself facing a population that suddenly believed freedom was possible. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds throughout the empire. The news of the royal fleet's defeat spread faster than the hegemony could control it. Species that had been enslaved for centuries began to rise up, knowing that someone was finally strong enough to stand against their oppressors. Back on Veltar Prime, King Zarok watched his empire begin to crumble. Reports of rebellions came. Hourly, entire sectors were declaring independence. Hegemony forces that had ruled through fear for millennia were being overwhelmed by populations that no longer feared them. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence chief, Velka. "How did one defeat lead to the collapse of everything we built?" The old creature cowered before his rage. "My lord, the empire was held together by fear of your power. The royal fleet was the symbol of that power. With its destruction, the subject worlds no longer believe we are invincible. Then we will show them otherwise, deploy the home defense fleets, crush these rebellions." "My lord," Velka said carefully, "the home defense fleets are needed here. We have received intelligence that human ships have been detected in multiple systems throughout the empire. They appear to be supporting the rebellions." Zarok felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. The humans weren't content to simply defend their own world. They were actively hunting down his forces throughout the galaxy, and they were winning. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it dropped out of hyperspace in the Altair system. Below them, the world of New Harmony had been under hegemony rule for 50 years. Its population of peaceful farmers had been forced to produce food for the Empire's war machine. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "I'm reading 12 hegemony ships in orbit. They appear to be loading cargo from the planet's surface." "Signal the lead ship," Santos ordered. "Standard liberation protocol." The communication came through to the hegemony cruiser Void Hunter, whose captain was overseeing the seizure of the planet's grain harvest. Captain Drex was a veteran of many such operations, used to taking what he wanted from helpless worlds. "Hegemony vessel," came the human transmission. "This is Captain Santos of the United Earth Defense Force. You are in violation of this world's sovereignty. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Captain Drex laughed at the presumption. One human ship against 12 hegemony vessels? It was ridiculous. "Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered 12-1. Withdraw or be destroyed." Santos' reply was calm and confident. "Captain, you have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. After that, we will consider you a hostile force." Drex was about to respond when his sensor officer called out in alarm. "Captain, I'm reading massive hyperspace signatures throughout the system, multiple contacts incoming." The space around New Harmony suddenly filled with human ships. Dozens of them, appearing from hyperspace with perfect coordination. They surrounded the hegemony force in a matter of seconds. "Still want to discuss terms?" Santos asked over the communication channel. The hegemony ships surrendered without firing a shot. News of the liberation of New Harmony spread throughout the galaxy within days. For the first time in 3,000 years, a world had been freed from hegemony rule, and the humans had done it with such overwhelming force that resistance had been pointless. King Zarok realized that his empire was not just collapsing, it was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Every day brought news of more defeats, more rebellions, more worlds declaring their independence under human protection. "My lord," Velka reported during their daily briefing, "we have lost contact with 17 sectors in the past week. Our remaining forces are requesting permission to withdraw to the core worlds." "How many ships do we have left?" Zarok asked, dreading the answer. "Approximately 800 combat-capable vessels, my lord. But they are scattered across the Empire, trying to contain the rebellions. 800 ships. A month ago, he had commanded over 10,000. The royal fleet alone had been 2,000 vessels strong. Now he was reduced to hiding in his home system, watching his empire burn. "My lord," his communication officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the humans. They are requesting an audience with you." Zarok's blood ran cold. The humans were here at Veltar Prime. How had they penetrated so deeply into hegemony space without being detected? "Put them through," he commanded. Admiral Chen appeared on the main screen, her calm expression a stark contrast to the chaos in the throne room. Behind her, Zarok could see the bridge of a human warship, filled with confident officers who showed no fear of the galaxy's former master. "King Zarok," she said, "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Command. We need to talk. You dare to come to my home system?" Zarok snarled. "I should have you destroyed for this insult." Chun's expression didn't change. "You're welcome to try, Your Majesty, but I should mention that we didn't come alone." The king activated his own sensors and felt his remaining courage drain away. The space around Veltar Prime was filled with human ships, hundreds of them arranged in perfect battle formation. His home fleet, the last significant force remaining to the hegemony, was completely surrounded. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Unconditional surrender," Chun replied. "The dissolution of the hegemony. The immediate liberation of all remaining slave worlds. And your abdication from power. And if I refuse?" Chun gestured to something off-screen, and a tactical display appeared showing the positions of all ships in the system. The human fleet outnumbered his remaining forces by more than 10 to 1. "Then we will remove you from power by force." "Your choice, Your Majesty?" Zarok looked around his throne room at the faces of his advisors and officials. He saw fear, defeat, and something else, relief. Even his own people were tired of the endless wars and conquests. "The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, he said finally, "and brought nothing but misery to countless worlds," Chun replied. "That ends today." King Zarok, ruler of the galaxy and terror of 1,000 worlds, slowly removed his ceremonial war crown and placed it on the floor at his feet. The symbol of 3 millennia of conquest rolled across the polished bone floor and came to rest against the base of his throne. "The hegemony surrenders," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber for the last time. Within days, the news spread across the galaxy. The hegemony was finished. King Zarok had been placed under house arrest on a remote world, his empire dissolved, his fleets surrendered or destroyed. Thousands of worlds that had lived under alien oppression for centuries were suddenly free. And at the center of it all were the humans, the species that had risen from a single blue world to become the galaxy's liberators. They established new trade routes, negotiated peace treaties, and helped former slave worlds rebuild their civilizations. The age of conquest was indeed over. In its place came something the galaxy had never seen before, an age of cooperation, guided by a species that believed freedom was the birthright of every sentient being. From Earth, Admiral Chun sent a final message to the galaxy, to every world, every species, every being who desires to live in peace and freedom. Know that you are not alone. Humanity stands ready to help those who cannot help themselves. The darkness is ending, the dawn has come.